And it's Friday in most places in the world. And it is time for episode 50, the big 50 for KTLO, keeping the learning on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's episode is ideas to action. Think about it. Do it. But is that all there is to it? Let's explore with our fabulous core four: Patty Blackstaff, Greg Sanker, Simone Jo Moore, and me. And what a wonderful time we shall have. And guests. We have guests too. There's our contact information, our website at ktllearn.com. The hashtag is KTLOlearn. If you want to tweet us or post anything, please include the hashtag. And that, my dear friends, is that. Let's get on with it, shall we? As you know, we have established here in season 3 having an interviewer du jour. And today's interviewer is the inimitable Patty Blackstaff. But you have one guest in the waiting room right now, and that's our regular sidekick, Kathy Veldboom. We'll let Kathy in, and Patty, you can take it away.
Right on, right on. Ideas to action. Well, I'm looking forward to this one because I don't know a group of people that are better at ideas than the 3 people I get to spend my Fridays with. And the coolest thing about that is each and every one of them take action. So they know which ones to prioritize and which ones not to, and they take action on it. And the way they take action is through their mindset. So I really absolutely love the ability to talk and interview today, because a lot of the content we're going to talk about is something that each and every one of us in organizations have the pleasure of being a part of. And it's just going to be a fun ride. And there is this concept of ongoing. And I want to break that down because that's something that Roy talks about. Roy, let's start with you. Why do businesses not understand the concept of ongoing?
Everybody likes to have a nice, clean beginning. I'm starting this project. You're going to do it. And it will end by December 31st, 2022. And it will be done. And we can put a check in the box and move on. Everybody likes that kind of thing. It's nice and clean and easy. It's easy to measure. But if you say it goes back to commitment, right, Patty? It's saying that we're going to do this from now until the end of time. We're going to change the way that we do this forever. We're not going to do it this way anymore. We're going to do it that way from now on, for the foreseeable future, until we decide that it needs to be changed and we do something else. And that scares people. And again, it's more difficult to measure that type of change than it is to something that has a clear-cut beginning and a defined end. So organizations get nervous around things that they think they can't measure. But, the most important measures in business are always those lagging indicators, right? Did sales go up or down? Are customers happier now or less happy? Are we getting a bigger market share or are we not? All of those indicators that tell businesses how they're really doing are the ones that matter when you make long-term changes. So you have to be careful and measure and look for long-term trends.
And you measure iteratively along the way. How does that relate to continuous improvement? What you're talking about?
Well, it's very close to continuous improvement, isn't it? You want to make sure that your organization is moving in a better direction. And so the way that you do that, as you say, your metrics, however often you take them, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, you want to see a fairly clear-cut trend line. You're not going to see, oh, we're better today than yesterday, and tomorrow will be better than today. But overall, you want to see that nice trend line that says, oh, look, we are getting better. Our revenue is up, our market share is up, our employees are happier, our customers are happier. That's the kind of thing that you want to see over time.
All right, awesome. I'm just gonna pause for a minute and say a quick hello to Kathy. I didn't get a chance to say hello to you coming in.
Okay.
We're gonna stick with the core four, and then we'll get to our guest interlude. You might be on the hot seat.
I'm hanging out and learning.
Keeping on the learning.
That's right.
Greg, based on what Roy has said, that takes I would say that takes a learning track. Like it takes an ongoing, when you use that word, ability to have a learning mindset that is focused on excellence. So what's the biggest issue you see in corporate?
Like around growth and development and learning. Yeah. So I think it really comes down to this, because like everybody that's involved with corporate learning and development just like listen to like, ooh, what is Greg going to say is wrong with this? Nothing's wrong with this. What's wrong is that organizations so often have a chasm between whatever it is, the vision and direction that the senior most executives have in mind that they may or may not have effectively communicated, and what training is in place to support that. Right. So our learning and development is often disconnected from a strategic plan that says, okay, this is where we're going. And to get there, we're going to need to have a culture like this. And to have a culture like that, we need to be emphasizing these kinds of skills, these kinds of, cultural elements that like emotional intelligence is not normally thought of as, hey, we're going to move to the cloud, so we need to train on emotional intelligence. So you have to be looking more holistically at what is it that we're trying to achieve and what do we need to have in place to do that. And I think that's what's missing. I think a lot of the training programs that we have are a lot of people's best of intention to do exactly that. But it's the senior leadership that has the governance responsibility to guide and direct and monitor and evaluate the performance in that direction. And if that's not happening, there's where your disconnect is.
So are you saying that there is that gap lives on not recognizing and understanding it from a system level, from a systems to outcome level?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're still looking at it in a lot of cases. Now, some companies are rocking this. Let's just be clear. But they're fairly rare and they're fairly exceptional. And they're the kind of organizations that have very strong and very robust leadership, meaning a very emotionally aware, very visionary kind of leaders that understand that it takes the entire organization. But if you're command and control, if you're hierarchy oriented, if your membership has its privileges, I'm in the boardroom and therefore I know everything and all that. If a lot of these old behaviors are what kind of leaves us in that state. The fact of the matter is you have to fix the system, or more correctly, you have to build the system to do what you want to do. Here's an analogy that I use all the time. I have a 1974 Bug in my driveway that, Lord willing, someday I'm going to restore back to life. It's driven not that long ago. But that car will never, and I repeat, never win the Indianapolis 500 or a Formula One race. I can replace the motor with the biggest motor. I can bolt on all kinds of really cool stuff, and I can paint a 53 on the side of it. But it will never, ever win the Indianapolis. And the reason is it wasn't designed to do that. You look at the machinery that's winning races, and it was designed from the ground up by people who are experts at creating vehicles and the systems that support them, including the people and the telemetry and the technology to win that race. That's how holistically organizations need to be thinking about winning the game that they're in. They've got to look at it as a system, and they've got to be investing holistically in everything that it takes to be successful.
I like that. So the design, which makes me think then there's got to be a complete rethought. So if there is that, Simone, what would be driving a complete rethought approach to talent management? Like what do we have to do to change in order to accommodate looking at that in the big picture view?
I was actually thinking that perhaps we need some of Herbie's magic to put into the system. Could you imagine when you said 53, my heart just went. I mean, I love my Herbie movies. But and let's face it, Herbie faced a few situations of chaos. And I think this is where some organizations are finding themselves in the system. They're coming out of some chaos. They're reinventing themselves. They want to have this fresh face. But out of that is really emerging the realization that key to that survival is their talent, and that requires empathy. Now, according to World Economic Forum's 2021 Upskilling for Shared Prosperity, I like that word, the prosperity report, is that more than half of employees are requiring significant reskilling by 2022. Because of the shifts and the changes that are happening in the system and in the environment that they're working in. So, and I think for too long too, that essence of what makes us human, the empathy, the values, emotions, those soft skills had been relegated to the sidelines. Well, they can't do that anymore, because the capacity for those skills is what's driving the shifts in the culture, the new levels of engagement required, the switch in how we lead, the innovation. You've got to be able to connect before you can connect things, right? So we need the collaboration. These are the cornerstone of what makes an organization resilient, thriving, and agile. I've often said that what makes up this beast of an organization is a sea of souls, right? So a human center of gravity can change. And wherever that balance is skewed, we need to give them that ability to build their resilience and find the equilibrium so that people can actually move with the ebb and the flow and recognize and participate in those changes as natural as the tides that come and go, right? So I think a key to understanding their capability, which is both competency and skill, I do separate those things. The context here is transforming competency. So unless you're going to build yourself a whole person approach that looks at capability in that holistic way, and that includes the values, the experiences, their professional skills, their knowledge, behaviors, qualifications and certifications, it's got to be a whole of person approach. That's what competency transformation really requires.
I love that. I love the competency transformation, and then Greg, that lean out to excellence, right? That's big. I know that LinkedIn has been pouring an awful lot of an awful lot of time and energy into their learning platform. And one of the things that they have done is done a really large survey, actually, with a number of their people. And some of the priorities are interesting, such as upskilling and reskilling is going to increase rapidly, but with a focus on internal mobility. So taking those people with you as opposed to reaching outside, because there's good recognition that there is no true, how do I say this? There isn't a pool of people waiting to take on the new roles that are going to be landing in our lap soon. And they know that needs to be organic from the inside. But I think there's some confusion around the difference between skills and capabilities. What do you think is the difference, Greg?
Did you see me raising my hand? I totally wanted to weigh in on skills and capabilities. So for years and years and years, it was so frustrating to me as a leader in an organization, because we send people off to class, they get skilled up in a task, and they get a certification that they come back and hang on the wall of their cubicle, and it does me absolutely nothing. No offense, but it does me nothing, because they have to be able to use that. And to do that, we have to have the people, the processes, the culture, the support, the investment. And there's so much more than just a skill. So there's a skill thing. There's absolutely a skill thing. But a capability is using that skill in the context of the organization. So let me give an example. So let's say I become a manager at a manufacturing company that's been doing lots of things over the years. And I go through the warehouse and I say, there's an industrial sewing machine. Do we have the capability to produce parachutes with that sewing machine? Yes or no? I don't know. The answer is I don't know. Does it work? I don't know. Do I have people that know how to run that machine? I don't know. Do I have the standard operating procedures? Do I have the blueprints? Do I have the design work? Do I have the proper electricity and support for it? Do I have the technicians that can service that machine? A capability is the ability to do something that includes skills, but is much, much broader than that. And that's where your leadership has to pursue a plan that brings all of those elements together. And that's how you produce excellent results within the context of your corporation.
I want Roy to weigh in just a little bit on skills and competencies here. Because I think this is traveling down something that is near and dear to his heart as well.
Yeah, I just in response to what Greg was talking about, I think that it's correct. A lot of times people will go and they'll take a class and they'll get the certificate and they'll stick it on their cubicle wall, and that'll be the end of it. But I think an awful lot of the responsibility for that falls on the leadership. They have to say, what did you learn? What did you bring back from this? And how does it fit in with our team? What extra capability does it give us that we didn't have before you went to that class? A lot of times they really don't really listen that much. Even if you come back and you're really excited about it and you send email to your boss that says, hey, we learned this, and this, and I think we could integrate some of that into the things that we do every day. A lot of times it's like, oh, okay, great, thanks. And that's the end of it. Again, because it's an ongoing change that we talked about earlier. So yeah, it's got to work both ways.
Well, and that you said you had to email your boss anyone that has to email their boss to tell them that they found this thing out from training, and their boss isn't standing at their door saying, so how was it? What, there is a lot to that. Greg, I want you to respond to that, because this was that skills and capabilities area that you are passionate about.
I'm very passionate about this. So here's one of the things that I did to combat that thing. What Roy just described is exactly what I've seen literally in every organization that I've ever been. And as a leader that's responsible for a budget and wanting to achieve results, that bothers me. It's like, I'm not sending you to class just to get the certification. And the other element, I'm going to add this, the other element is people become cynical. Yeah, I'll go to class, whatever, slap the certificate on my wall. But I know darn well that you're not going to let me do anything. So what I did when I sent people to class is I had a one-on-one, face-to-face, just like you said, Patty, and I said, what did you learn? And here's what I want. And they got very, very used to it. I want one aspirational thing from you that you think that we should be working toward. Like, what is it that you learned that we should be doing? And I want one thing that you believe that we can do in the next week to move us in that direction. In other words, you don't come back and dream starry-eyed like we should, reconfigure everything. Maybe that's what we need to do, but what are you going to do today, tomorrow, and the day after that? And then we'll talk about our next one-on-one. I think that is where the power meets the road, is like when you say, look your boss eye to eye and say, I'm excited about this, and this is what I want to do.
I love that. Take it one step further, though, and say, hey, is there something you could build a lunch and learn on what you learned for the team, or those of you who went, for the rest of us, that we can understand the value in that? Which leads me over to Simone, speaking of passion, about how training is structured and how organizations really can take a deep discovery tour of their capability to know kind of the direction they need to go. And that is a hot topic for Simone.
Yeah, first of all, pay attention to all our curiosity episodes that we've made, because you're not going to get there without being curious. And that's where you've got to ask the questions. You need to explore. And when you're going to explore your capability, you need it to do it from not to, from a bird's eye advantage. You want to see, across everything. But then when you sort of go, oh, and then you need to take that deep dive into those potholes or Grand Canyons. So you get a better idea and understanding if your business vision and mission is actually succeeding, because it won't be if your capabilities don't exist or they're skewed in some way. You're going to start to see the possibilities of how you can work on your organizational roles. Maybe the roles aren't pinged together the right way. The skill design for those roles could be skewed as well, because what you're looking to do is create deep functional expertise in your people. You're looking to have that, success flowing through the individual. I don't mean in the individual, I mean through the individual. It means what they've got is actually coming outwards, and that flows into the team, and then that flows into the organization level. I can hear myself going back to ebb and flow again, isn't it? But there's the key avenue here is allowing that psychological safe space as well for safe to fail experimentation. And that it's not about safe to fail on the technology or the processes necessarily. We're talking about even the way we apply the skills. Hey, I've learned this new technique or this new approach. Can we try that and see if that works better in this scenario? And what you're doing is you're jumpstarting people's thinking and their evolution in behavior and actions that they're taking at any level then. And the result is that you're going to provide an opportunity for, optimization, which is great, improve what you've got, but also too, where you can transform. So in the context of that journey that you're taking to be the best at whatever it is that you want to be the best at, and obtain that excellence that Greg talks about, with our customers and the competency levels of our people, those are going to be constantly evolving. There are new ones being developed and appearing all the time. And I think in understanding how that can take you forward, look at your competency framework, have your skills matrix in place, know what you currently have. And there's frameworks like the skills framework for the information age sphere. I mean, version 8 is now coming up. This is a skills framework that's constantly adapting to the new ways of working and the new types of roles that are being seen in organizations. And it's not just about a skill, something active that you're physically doing. It's also about autonomy levels and levels of responsibility. So you can have a skill that's, say, level 3, I'm working away, that's really nice. I don't necessarily have any leadership responsibilities of other people. But if you want to take that skill and deepen it, that's that deep functional expertise, you're going to up your game in terms of your level of responsibility and autonomy. So I think that's really important, because we want to look at the talent and create a more flexible workforce model so that you can make those shifts and changes.
I think the very nature of the rapid changes that we believe are going to continue coming, the nature of disruption, I guess you could call it, requires adaptability. I mean, the organization has to be adaptable. And so those things can't be written in stone. But there's other pieces to it. There's other responsibilities, I guess, that it can't live in talent development's area of the world. The responsibilities need to truly flow elsewhere. And Roy, I've heard you mention quite a few times how important it is to get middle managers on board. Can you help me with that? Can you expand on that?
Sure. Well, as Simone and I have discussed on previous episodes, sergeants run the Army, right? For those of you who are tuning in and don't know, Simone is a veteran of the Army of Australia. And sergeants are the ones who make things happen. Let's put it that way. The orders may be made on high. Sergeants make the stuff happen. The same is true in organizations, that middle managers are the ones who are usually tasked with having their teams produce the results that the leadership wants to have. What happens a lot of time is that there's this gap between what the leadership is thinking and what the middle managers are actually doing. A lot of that goes back to something we talked about on a previous episode, which is that resistance or response to change that says, yeah, we've seen this before. The last guy that was in that role said the same thing, or want you to do it this way. We're not going there. And so what you wind up with is what I call transformational deficit. It's that gap. It's sort of along the lines of, and sometimes goes right along with, is joined at the hip with technical debt. Technical debt being that amount of cost that you're accruing by not improving your systems. And then eventually you have to change them, and it's going to cost you a load of money to do it. Transformational deficit means that now you've got farther to go to get your middle managers on board, get the teams up to speed to produce the results that you want to do. So what should be happening is that you work with those middle managers to understand the changes that need to happen and to make them happen as you go, as ongoing, back to the word ongoing that I talked about earlier on. Because the way I put it is that the middle managers are the hinge on which the organization swings. They're the ones that make the changes happen. So there's a difference between leadership saying yes to, that is, affirming necessary change, and confirming the changes with appropriate cultural shift.
Affirming and confirming with cultural shift. I like that. One of the keys is that we have to change our mindset then as middle managers from being in a every employee has a budget for training, and so I got to figure out what they need to be trained in, and or you ask the team, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? Or you say, can we pool your training and do some kind of offsite thing? And oftentimes that has little to do with team building or training. It has more to do with recreation. And I call that team recreation. I don't call it team building, because building is where you actually have contextual outcomes for teams.
And there's another part of that too, Patty, if I may, and that's that you have this budget for training and you have to spend it. Oh, I have to spend this budget, because if I don't spend the budget this year, I won't get it next year. So I'll just spend it on stuff.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that we need to have a real clear discussion with finance on how continuous improvement works for being able to build training budgets and retain training budgets that move forward. Greg?
Well, like what you just described was the difference between a strategic investment that you don't discuss and dismiss. That's a transactional thing. A strategic investment is, we need to get here. And we know that specific investments, including in people, in processes, in technology, and in culture, have to be made to do that. So just the very idea of, well, we got a training budget, we better spend it. It's like, that tells you right there, guaranteed, you have no strategic investments in your people if that's what you're doing. And I'm going to hopefully get to that, Patty, if you'll let me, after preaching here. I'm going to get to that later, but that is so telling of what's happening or what's not happening within the organization. You don't know where you're going, and you don't know how you're going to get there if that's what you're doing.
Oh, that is about excellence. That is the path. Like I'm hearing this, when I talk about, when you talk about, Simone, competency transformation, and then you look at experiential, because that's Roy's baby. That is customer experience, employee experience, and development, and how that leads to the cultural changes within an organization. Then we pool that all together, and we're talking about a mindset or an attitude toward excellence, right? That's the three of you make one incredible organization all combined.
Imagine if we were on a project together.
Right? Kathy, I'm going to pull you in here. I'd really love to hear from you. You've heard some of what we've talked about.
Yes.
Of course, you have some incredible experiences in some really awesome organizations. And I'd love to hear what you think are either the top issues or where people fail to take ideas to action.
Thanks, Patty. First, I'll say I think there's an important point is the people that have come before you. If you have long-term people that have been with the company and you come in, they still are hanging on to the old management style because they don't know what your management style is. Okay. So quickly, the first thing that I do is I start to set the culture. Okay. And we talked a lot about setting the culture. And I'm going to go back to my old favorite Admiral William McRaven with his commencement speech in 2014, where he talks about row the boat. And row the boat, I tell everyone is equal. Everyone is important. No ideas are stupid. And if I find someone saying that, there's a conversation to be had, because that sets an environment where people are not afraid to present an idea for improvement, for trying things when you get to the execution stage and you're ready to try and put this change or improvement or whatever it is into place. And for them to know that if they mess up, I'll say, that they're not going to be tortured for it, that that's going to be used as a growth and learning opportunity. And their peers are not going to treat them differently because of their failure. So getting to that culture where, hey, I'm trying this new thing that you want to do. And, maybe my the training wasn't really sticking with that person. So they muck up, it happens. It happens to us every day in our personal lives. So
Sure.
Why do we put this mindset at work that it's not okay to make mistakes? The other thing is I wrote down a couple notes here, modeling for them, not just setting the culture by words, but actually modeling. Are we slow to put changes in place? Because that tells them that it's like, oh, well, she's just going to think on it. And it's like a year later and you haven't given them any update or communication. So that bidirectional communication is huge also. They need to start saying what's in their heads, because that's how you get, the cohesiveness to make that change stick. Let's say updates bidirectional. Oh, do you start and not finish? Because that's another one. I used to be a person who loved to start things, but I got a reputation of the person that started it, got it about 90% there, and then thought, oh, it's off and running and I don't have to worry about it anymore. I do have to worry about it. The day after, the week after, and so on and so forth. And that gets us into the agile mindset of continuous change, because if you put something in place, you may have to go back and tweak it. And how are you going to tweak it? From your employees what's not going right. Maybe the customers aren't receiving something well, a change that you had put in place, and they're hearing that feedback. And so again, it's just creating that community, and we're all going to do it together, and also getting them to speak up. I have come into teams where making change that they're not able to, say they wanted new tools that will accelerate their troubleshooting abilities. But IT has always said, no, we don't like that, or this, that, or the other thing, champion for them. Go make that change happen, and their jobs will be better, and the customers will be happier because you're resolving the issues faster.
I love that, because your job really as a leader is to remove roadblocks.
Thank you. That was one of my notes. Right? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Remove the roadblocks and empower them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about setting culture, because I don't hear a lot of leaders talk about that when they first walk in, setting the culture. And I think that's an external learning viewpoint and mindset, as opposed to, oh, I'm the boss now and here I'm arriving and now I'm going to start to set the tone. So it's different, right? The tone is about me, the culture is about the whole. And I really loved how you said that, Kathy.
Exactly. And if we talk to new managers, speaking to you out there, that if you haven't had those outside experiences to teach you what a great culture environment might be, hopefully you're listening to this this session for one thing, go back and listen to the other sessions for another thing, and go out there and become part of communities that talk about this, that talk about, speak to people, reach out to people on LinkedIn that you've looked up to, ask them about it. Everyone's willing to help. Don't try and just go in it alone and, try and throw things at the wall.
Yeah, I agree. Although sometimes experimentation is what can we throw against the wall, but it's let's do that together, right? So
yes,
it's really about understanding that we are a community and that there is this united force that leads towards something.
right.
Roy, that transformational deficit, I want to hear a little bit more about that, because I think that how does it figure into the ideas to action theme? Can you expand on that for me?
Well, obviously, you're not going to make progress if you're not putting things into action. And I think almost all of what we've talked about today, it has to do with the fact that we need to get people up to speed. We need to encourage them to produce the results that we're looking for and provide the resources and incentives and all the other things that have to go along with that. So that overcoming that transformational deficit means putting resources to work to get those people in the organization who need to have the capabilities that we're looking for to produce the results that we need to get to. So we have to get rid of the deficit by putting resources, like a financial deficit. What do we have to do? We have to put resources in to pay off the deficit, right? Or to prevent the deficit from becoming debt, which is the next step, right? So it goes back to the idea of ongoing, and you have to do this over and over again. As Kathy said, it's when you get to 90% done, you can't just walk away from it and say, okay, we're done with that. The example that I've used sometimes in the past is because I grew up within a hair's breadth of the George Washington Bridge and used to be fascinated by that structure. The workers would paint the George Washington Bridge. They'd start on the New Jersey side and they'd paint across the bridge. And it took a very long time. It's a very massive structure and they can't work when the weather is too bad. And so they'd get to the other side and they'd finish and then they'd come back, paint back the other way. And then they'd paint back the other way. That painting that bridge was a continuous operation, taking the rust spots off, chipping away the old paint that had deteriorated and putting the new coats of paint on. Very important. And every bridge structure is the same way. And that's why we have deteriorating infrastructure. Why do we have deteriorating infrastructure in the country? Why are our bridges falling apart? Because they have not been consistently maintained. The same thing happens over time with our ideas. We come in, we're full of the idea, and it may be the greatest idea ever. If we put it into the organization and that maintenance is not performed, the care and feeding of that idea is not performed, we wind up with that deficit. Now we've got rust spots and deteriorating paint on it. Nobody's maintaining it. And so over time, it falls apart.
I love the example of that continuous improvement on the bridge. I think that's, maintenance is also improvement, right? I mean, you have to see where the gaps are and what's going on with that. And there is this North Star that an organization, a purpose and a vision that an organization is going toward. And speaking of bridges, so how do you move, Simone? How do you bridge from idea to action, especially when you are also battling the change in the North Star? Because you have new CEOs that come in, new CIOs that come in, you have people who want to put their mark on things, you have acquisitions, what you call mergers and acquisitions. What's the bridge from idea to action that is really responsible with leadership measures?
I think it comes back to one of the things we've talked about earlier, especially if you're a new leader in there, but even if we've gone through a new context in our environment or situation, as we have done over the last year or so as well, that, you know, having that skills matrix and understanding those capabilities, as we've talked about earlier, is really important, because new business models can really be driven by what we know we have in terms of our capability. Sometimes I call those, you know, pantry days, you know, when you haven't been out grocery shopping for a long time because you've been in lockdown and of course you've got a curfew. So you become a master at discovering
what can I make with
what can I make out of this. So yeah, I think that's part of what I would, you know, would be called surfacing the capability, because a lot of the time it is hidden until we you know, do the exploration. But what we want to do is surface it so that it's no longer invisible. And it's really important, because what I've often found when I go into organizations and help them go through and look at doing a competency transformation is that a lot of their people have either been ill-equipped as a result of not understanding the capabilities either they have or what was necessary, ill-equipped to cope with what they need to do, or that they have skills that have been underused or just not even applied because they didn't even know they existed. I think a big point is we're not just maintaining capability, which is definitely very important for sustaining, but you're not going to thrive unless you start expanding that capability and deepening it, so that you can, but that also provides a sense of stability. You know, people can see that you're getting stronger. The system's becoming more flexible. It's enabling you to be more adaptable so you can make those shifts. I'm
going to interrupt you here, and I'm going to let you go on, honestly, but I want to highlight what you just said, because it's very, very important people understand that. Strength does not come from control. Strength comes from adaptability. I love that, and I wanted to make sure that everybody heard that a second time. I'm sorry to interrupt, but go forward.
No. Well, and there's a big difference between being flexible and adaptable. You know, in flexible, we can move from one place to another, but to actually shift, you have to adapt because you become something new. There's something else that comes in there, and you've got to go from a place of strength to do that, and continue to do that. And I think in helping a business engage fully with their knowledge, I think knowledge management is still not seen strongly, fully across the organization. It's still seen as this just an SOP or a policy, or I can look it up on the web and do something. But, that's our lifeblood. That's what capability is. It's our knowledge and ability to do. And through that, we also build our collaboration and we increase our viability. That's the other thing. It's not just, we're capable, it's our viability. So we really need to emulate a learning and knowledge culture. I think that yearning for always wanting to do more or better at it across the organization. And because we're going to benefit then from more accurate, more interesting, and more relevant business learning, if that's the case, from those experiments, or even just the day-to-day, harnessing what we learn from what we do every day. From there, you were talking about compass earlier, and it's so right, because everyone, when you know what that compass is, when you know where what it is that you're trying to achieve, that everyone understands what's important, and they establish that compass. They establish the direction they're moving. They'll know what's expected in terms of their behavior. They understand how to make decisions better. Things like the social skills, that collaboration, emotional agility, process skills, especially things like critical thinking, active listening. Mm-hmm. These all really continue to be important to success.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about what Roy has said, in terms of transformational deficit and how he expanded on that brilliantly. And then moving that forward, we understand then that training and development isn't a staff thing, it's an all business thing. That learning mindset at the business level, which includes leaders, which includes the C-suite, which includes maybe the board, because and I know that Roy and Greg have talked about this quite a bit. I've heard them discuss it in some of our episodes before about, and I wrote it down because the top can be unaware of the effort, what's there, what's realized at different levels of the organization. And so when they don't know that, they can hardly strive to ideas to action in an excellent way. So I'm going to, now that I've kind of, pulled the three of you together in that, based on that really great training model and idea of adaptability, taking the gap, understanding the deficit. What does excellence look like, Greg? I'm going to throw that at you for ideas to action.
Well, so this is fundamental perception of you existing in the context of a culture or an organization, and it's typified, at least in the title, if not in the content, of Cliff Hackham. Wrote a book that's fairly old at this point in time. He said, "We're all self-employed, how to take control of your own career." And the idea is are your skills and your capability the responsibility of your employer? Are you? Who takes responsibility for me and how I show up, right? And so people that are brand themselves, who market themselves as themselves, it's fairly obvious. Like, I don't expect to train a consultant on how to do the job that we hired them to do. But I've met employees who go, look, if you want me to know how to do blah, 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 my job, then you have to train me for that. And I take that as a little bit of as a victim mentality. There's a fairly famous Aristotle quote that says, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence then is not an act, a point in time, but a habit. And that gets me to the heart of excellence in the context of it's my responsibility to soak up, to absorb, to fuel myself, to learn and grow and be contextually aware of how am I fitting in, how am I contributing, how am I hurting the organization that I'm in. And one of the things when I talk about excellence is there's a number of relationships that we have to renegotiate. And I'm only going to talk about a couple of them here. And the three that I'm going to talk about is you have to renegotiate your relationship with your identity. Am I me, or am I me in the context of my position, i.e. I'm a database analyst, I'm a CIO, I'm a whatever, or am I me and I bring me to whatever it is that I do, whatever problems I solve, whatever services I provide, whatever, problems that I fix for organizations. So we need to renegotiate our relationship with our own identity. And the other two that I'm going to mention just briefly is we need to renegotiate. Kathy mentioned this. We renegotiate our relationship with failure. Failure is not to be avoided. Failure is not the enemy. If you think about it, failure is one of the primary ways that we learn. And yet, like as a child, you learn how to walk by falling down and trying things, and they're sometimes bizarre, odd things. But ultimately, most human beings learn how to walk. Why? Because they weren't afraid to fail. But somewhere along the way, we learned that failure is bad. Don't look bad. Don't make a mistake. People will make fun of you. People will think you don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And
we're punished for it. Yeah.
Right. Or they're gunning for it, right, in a fear culture. So we've got to renegotiate our relationship with failure. Failure is to be embraced, not just endured, but embraced. And the last one is we have to renegotiate that I'm going to talk about. We have to renegotiate our relationship with success. If we tie our success to achieving this or achieving that, or making so much money, or checking some box, that is not excellence. That's achievement. That's a very different thing. Success is who you are as you do what you do. And so excellence then is me being me and doing things that are meaningful in the context of my corporation. And I harp on this, Patty and crew, because this is what I see in organizations. Most people want to be part of something that's excellent. Most people believe that they could do something excellent if they had the right opportunity. And so many organizations have such toxic and backward cultures that people are not allowed the opportunity to be excellent. And the impact that it has on the world and the culture and frustration and all those negative behaviors that derive from the inability to do what you feel you were born to do is catastrophic on the culture. That's why I talk about it so much.
I love that, because you said you personally and the organization have to renegotiate your identity, failure, and success models for both yourself, but that's so important at the organizational level, and that really will realize potentiality, right? That's the expansion of potentiality. So Simone, throwing the ball your way, because I don't know how many times throughout our sessions that I've heard you say potential. So how do you see potential driving a shift in vision?
See, this is the thing, we talked in another episode about, where do dreams go? And I think, Greg has really nailed it too, that if we don't do these things, then the dream doesn't turn into reality, and everything has potential. Everything has potential to go one way or another, up, down, good, bad, or indifferent. It has the potential. I think part of what, Greg was saying is, and I've said this before, you didn't come this far only to come this far. Seriously, this is if we're going to be in this race, to reskill, we need to know both the destination as well as how to better integrate that learning into our business, of our work, and integrate ourselves into that. So I think, you need to lead with purpose. Absolutely. We need to lead with resilience. And, that resilience is, we don't put resilience into someone. They experience, they build it, but we have to nurture that, and both in ourselves and our staff. But most of all, we've got to lead with competence, because that's the reality, isn't it? That's what will move us. So with that shift in business models to that more networking style of capability, people often look to external solutions when the capability is already existing inside you. Sometimes they just need someone to help them see it and use it. And so where we find the gap, that's when we can look at what kind of goals do we want to set, what kind of creative and intelligent solutions might we have across different frameworks that we can bring into play. We can bring in the skills and experience from outside if we don't have it, fine, because in doing that, we're also bringing in new blood. We're extending our ability and expanding our capability in that way too. I think this is where mixology comes in, my favorite thing of mixing frameworks, etc. Because when you really understand and integrate these things, you can find the next way. See, I'm tired of people saying that, the new norm and this sort of thing. It's not. It's just the next way, because there'll always be another way, a next way, and there can be a better way. We have to explore it, because there is a better way of working, and embed that within that day-to-day culture. It has to be something that becomes as easy as breathing to make those shifts. And I think the advantage of that, and it does come from one of my favorite movies, Mission to Mars, and they talk about this, because I want to stand on the edge of that planet and be able to look to the next one. This is that strength and adaptability. And then when I get to the next one, I want to be able to stand on the edge of that, and I've got that potential to get to the next one again. So happy to stand on that edge and, have that strength to do it. Because you know what, if we don't figure out how to energize the experience of our people and energize that experience within ourselves, that's when we won't be able to make that jump forward. So, let's find that energy within the people to actually want, that hunger to, you didn't come this far to only come this far.
Yeah. I love that you jumped on new normal, because I wish I could remember who I heard it from, but I love the expression I heard a few weeks ago, and they're saying, ask yourself the question, what's the now normal? What is our now normal? And I just
Yeah.
love the idea that we can inspire greatness through having a learning and an adaptable mindset, that we need to empower those middle managers to be able to actually help us build the capabilities we need. We don't have time not to be quite frank. And that shared responsibility and renegotiating ourselves with both our relationships for ourselves and for the organization. But the gap itself is only dangerous if we fail to acknowledge and look at it. And so we live in this world of trying to avoid seeing the risks, seeing the bad things, but we have to acknowledge that. Roy, I'm going to throw this at you because you've been quiet for far too long. What are some examples that happen when action doesn't follow ideas, so that we can understand what those risks are?
I was going to say that's the longest I've ever been quiet in my entire life. Not true, but okay. Can you re-ask me the question now that I've got that off my chest?
You know what? You talk about transformational deficit, and I think it's really important that we see the gap, that we look at what the risk is. And so I think we need to have some examples of what happens when action doesn't follow ideas, because it's nice to have all this inspirational conversation, but until we put it into the context of, but if you don't, then what? We get lost.
Yeah, essentially what happens is you wind up with one of those organizations that just kind of drifts along. And what happens is basically it's entropy. The organization starts to lose energy. The best employees shut up and gradually drift away. You start losing Kathy's nodding. We start losing our best people. And essentially you lose your momentum. And then something happens. Perhaps there's a disruption, or perhaps not. Perhaps it's just you wind up winding down, and people start saying, well, I better cash out my stock options now before this place goes under. And you wind up with no improvement and no place to go. And so I think most organizations don't want that to happen. But not wishing does not make it so. And so what needs to happen is the same thing I've been saying for years and years and years is, guess what? You have to do the work. You have to do the work, and you have to say, we're not going to wind up like that. How do we not wind up, rusting away and becoming useless? Well, we have to paint the bridge. So let's get the rust spots off. Let's get this place oiled up and ready to go. And that, again, that's, that ongoing maintenance of putting a little oil on the squeaky parts. Where's the squeaky parts? By that, I don't mean squeaky wheels get the grease. I just mean the squeaky parts need oil, and, oil can, as we say in The Wizard of Oz, right? So you have to do that. It's important.
I think this is my favorite episode. I think this is one of my favorite episodes, because I'm seeing that we need to bridge the chasm. This is what I've heard today. We need to bridge the chasm of what our North Star really says we need for capabilities within the organization, that we need to look at it in a way with new relationships, really have a clear eye on, the identity of the organization, the identity of the individuals, what failure looks like, and how we react and respond to it. How we define success at that middle management layer all the way through, so that we can really help people shine. Simone's idea of looking at resilience in a way that's different. And so there's additional priorities. It's not just about what technical capabilities do we need, but Simone, you know, I heard resilience, adaptability, tech skills. From Greg and Roy, I've heard digital fluency, communication across teams. We're hearing cross-functional collaboration, leading through change, managing those changes, but also looking at it with a really keen eye, with technical trends, leadership and management skills. The fact that we have to really take in consideration 30% of our business is now Gen Z. And I got to tell you, if we want talent and we want to grow talent internally, they're seeking career growth and targeted learning. So, you know, having that mindset of what did you learn? How are you going to share that? What can we do as a team with what you've learned? Targeted understanding of where that goes. I think that's going to change the organization. We have to have creative design. And Greg, you said something earlier today that was interesting, where you pinpointed something really keen for me, and that is by design. So we have to think about our organization by design. What are we doing? Anyway, we're at the top of the hour. I love this episode. The brilliance here at the table is so phenomenal. Kathy, I thank you for joining us. Roy, I'm handing it to you to throw us out the door.
I would never throw anybody out the door, ever. Wait, well, Greg, yes, I would throw Greg out the door.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, well, deservedly so. Very enjoyable conversation today, and thanks for being with us, Kathy, to you. And for can you hold that book up again if you still have it handy? Crossing the Chasm. Crossing the Chasm. All right, cool.
That is a must read for organizational leaders. I should let Kathy speak for herself, but that was mandatory reading at one of my early gigs, companies that I worked for. And I'm not a big fan of mandatory read, but that book is life-changing. It changes your perspective.
There are a few of them, and I would say for young, or I shouldn't say young, for people who have stepped into management roles without proper or formal training, it is a great eye-opening book.
The strength to stand on the edge and look to the next planet.
That's right.
She's talking about young people like me.
Yes, of course.
Shut up. Okay, so we're happy to have been with you today. Did I just tell Greg to shut up? Yes, I did. And we will be back next time for the conclusion of season 3 of Keeping the Learning. Oh, did I say? Oh, I almost said it. It's Keeping the Learning
Learning
on.